He doesn't belong here. I said, "Move it, old man. This is for students, not your kind." The student's arm shot out, shoving the elderly man backward. His body hit the stone steps hard. A cracking sound echoed across the Jefferson Military Institute courtyard. His wooden broom split in two like a snapped rifle barrel. Laughter. A phone raised. Someone shouted, "Yo, did you get that?" And not a single hand reached down to help. It was 6:03 a.m. A cold autumn morning in Charlottesville, Virginia. The flag had just been raised. The courtyard was bathed in the soft orange glow of campus lights flickering off. Grant Harlan, age 74, lay sprawled on the edge of the steps, his back aching and palms raw from the fall. He said nothing. He never did. He simply gathered the broken broom, adjusted the frayed collar of his canvas jacket, and stood slowly without a word to the boy who pushed him. But here's the twist no one saw coming. The man they just humiliated. He wasn't just some janitor who wandered onto campus with a mop and a misplaced sense of purpose. 30 years ago, Captain Grant Harlan was listed as presumed KIA in a covert extraction mission deep in Cambodia Operation Morning Watch 1983. No body recovered. No funeral. Just a file redacted and forgotten. Now he stood a man erased from the system, sweeping fallen leaves in silence. Why, that's the story. But before we go further, if you've ever seen someone like Grant mistreated, if you've ever wondered how many heroes we've lost to time and silence, leave a comment below. Type "never forgotten" if you believe honor never expires. Because what happens next will break your heart and restore your faith. 3 hours later, the governor of Virginia would arrive at this very courtyard and publicly salute the man now picking up broken bristles in the wind. But no one knew that yet. At this moment, all they saw was a stranger with a broom. "You know this is restricted faculty ground," barked another voice. Campus security, mid-40s badge glinting. He stepped over the cracked broom handle like it was trash. "You're not supposed to be here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Grant didn't argue. He just nodded once, then turned to the nearby bench where his satchel rested, the same one he brought every morning at the same time, 6 a.m. sharp. Inside it was a folded cloth, a dented thermos, and an old photo, the corners curled, the ink fading. 8 men, 1 helicopter, and fire in the background. He'd been coming here every morning for the past 9 years. He never crossed into the main campus, never disrupted anyone. He swept the memorial courtyard, stood at attention during flag raising, then left by 7:30 without a word. Most students didn't even notice him. Some thought he worked maintenance. Others, like that freshman who shoved him, thought he was just another relic of a time they didn't care to remember. Dr. Emily Rowan, however, noticed. From the second-floor faculty lounge window, she'd seen it all. The push, the fall, the silence. She gripped her coffee mug, tighter knuckles whitening. There was something in the old man's posture that wasn't fragile, it was practiced. Like someone who used to give orders but now took none. She rushed down the stairwell, but by the time she reached the courtyard, the man was already gone. All that remained was the snapped handle of a broom and a folded piece of paper sticking out of the trash bin nearby. On instinct, she pulled it out. It wasn't paper. It was a photograph. 8 soldiers in combat gear. Black smoke curling behind them. A UH-1 Huey barely holding together. And on the back, barely legible, Morning Watch, April 1983, last flight out. She froze. That name. She'd seen it once before. Her father had taught her to study the forgotten files, the ghost ops no one talked about. And Operation Morning Watch, that was one of the worst. An entire special recon unit sent in to extract prisoners. Only 1 chopper came back. Commander unaccounted for, presumed dead. Her heart pounded. She looked around the courtyard, suddenly unsure if she'd just witnessed an accident or a historic mistake. Had they just pushed a war hero onto the ground like he was garbage? She looked back at the photograph. One of the soldiers stood slightly apart from the others, square jaw, calm eyes, dust-streaked face, and a name scribbled faintly beneath his boots. CPT. Harlan. Grant Harlan. Was it possible she didn't go back to class that day? Instead, she found herself down in the Institute archives flipping through restricted access case files. Her credentials as a military ethics professor gave her clearance barely. And there it was. Operation Morning Watch. Redacted, redacted, redacted. But one line stood out. Captain Grant Harlan. Last seen covering evac team. Presumed KI. No recovery, no funeral, no closure, no VA record. She pulled up the VA National Registry, typed his name. Nothing. No pension, no death benefits, not even a rejected claim. He didn't exist. Except he did. Every morning. On these very steps. With a broom, a satchel, and a silence louder than any drum. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her father had told her once, the saddest thing about war isn't the dying, it's the forgetting, and if she was right, they had just forgotten someone standing right in front of them. She opened her laptop, typed, "To the office of Governor Evelyn Lane." Subject: "I believe I found the man who saved your brother's life," and hit send. The ones without a name. That man doesn't exist. Captain Grant Harlan died in 1983. The VA official didn't blink. No hesitation. No doubt. Just cold words delivered from behind a polished desk like they meant nothing. But to Dr. Emily Rowan, those words hit like a gunshot in the dark. Because she had seen him, felt the weight of the photograph, watched him bleed on concrete steps while students laughed. If you've ever known someone who vanished after war, someone the system gave up on, comment the word "unforgotten" below. Because this isn't just a story about a name, it's about every veteran who came back invisible. Emily clenched her phone tighter. He's not dead. I spoke to him. He's here. On campus. Every morning. The woman behind the VA desk offered a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. There are a lot of men who think they were someone, Professor. Trauma does strange things. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table surrounded by old papers, declassified files, and military archives printed in redacted ink. A single cup of coffee went cold as she read every line of the Morning Watch file. Only one mention of Captain Grant Harlan. Then missing in action. Presumed KIA. No body recovered, no medals listed, no burial, no pension, no trace. He had disappeared into the jungle and into history. But the photo in her hand proved otherwise. And the bruise on his wrist from the fall that morning was very real. So Emily made a decision. The next morning before dawn, she arrived at the courtyard and waited. At exactly 6:02 a.m., the soft scuff of boots on stone announced his arrival. Same jacket, same broom, same quiet reverence as the flag began to rise. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did and simply chose not to react. When he finished sweeping the eastern path, she approached slowly. "I know who you are," she said. He paused. "Captain Grant Harlan, Operation Morning Watch, Cambodia 1983. His hand tightened slightly on the broom handle. "I'm just keeping the place clean." "No, sir," she replied softly. "You kept them alive." He turned. His eyes were pale blue, but there was something deeper behind them. Pain, duty, maybe guilt. "What do you want?" "Not what I want. What you deserve." He gave her a long look, then without a word reached into his satchel and handed her something wrapped in cloth. Inside, a unit patch, frayed, edges burned, The faint words still legible, SRU 41 Morning Watch, and beneath it a bullet casing, not polished, not ceremonial, just a fragment from another time. I was the last one out, he said quietly. Or maybe the first left behind. Emily fought the lump rising in her throat. Why didn't you ever speak up? He shrugged. Didn't think anyone was listening, but someone was. While Emily searched archives, someone else had been following her quiet trail of requests. The email she had sent to the office of the governor flagged, forwarded, and within hours landed on the desk of Governor Evelyn Lane. Her brother, Lieutenant Marcus Lane, had served in morning watch. He had survived. Barely. But he never forgot the man who had laid down covering fire so they could get to the extraction point. He had told her, once there was this captain, never even saw his face. But if I'm alive, it's because of him. Governor Lane had never stopped looking. Now reading Emily's message and seeing the attached photo, she froze. In the back row of that photo, just behind the burning chopper, was the silhouette she remembered from her brother's story, Captain Harlan, at Jefferson Military Institute, still sweeping, still waiting. She stood from her desk and made a single call. Back on campus, word spread fast. Dr. Rowan had gone to the administration requesting records, but instead of support, she was met with resistance. What exactly are you trying to do here, Professor Chancellor? Martin Green's voice was cold. "'Cause a scandal, I'm trying to correct a 40-year mistake." He smirked. "Some ghost of a janitor gets shoved by a kid, and now you want the school to issue a proclamation?" "He's not a ghost," Emily snapped. "He's a soldier, a captain, and we shoved him twice, once into the jungle and again onto those steps." Green leaned back. "We have a reputation to uphold. Veterans are honored, yes, but we don't reward vagrancy and delusion." That word hit her like a slap. Delusion? He doesn't even have a valid ID. For all we know, he's mentally unwell. You want to be remembered for turning your back on a hero? I want to be remembered for running a university, not a charity. Emily walked out. She returned to the courtyard just before noon, clutching the photograph and the bullet casing. Harlan was gone for the day. But on the bench, carefully folded, was his old military jacket. A note pinned to it. "Sometimes it's easier to stay invisible, but not this time." Later that afternoon, a black SUV arrived at the faculty gate. No sirens, no entourage, just one woman in a dark blue coat stepping out with quiet purpose. "Governor Lane." She didn't call ahead, didn't ask permission. She walked across the campus as students whispered and phones began to buzz. She stopped in front of the memorial, looked around, and then she asked a question that made every security guard freeze. "Where is the man who raised this flag?" The silence that followed was deafening. She turned to Emily, who was already walking up with tears in her eyes. "I think he's still nearby," she whispered. Governor Lane nodded. "Then we're not leaving until we find him. Because what happens next will silence every voice that ever said he doesn't matter." And if you want to see what happens when silence meets honor, hit the subscribe button and join us for the next chapter. Because Grant Harlan's story isn't finished, it's just beginning. The Forgotten Monument. "Remove him now, or I'll revoke your campus license." The words came sharp and cold from Chancellor Martin Green's mouth, slicing through the quiet like a bayonet. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His authority carried the kind of weight that didn't shout. It crushed. At that moment, Dr. Emily Rowan felt the blood drain from her face. She was still holding the photograph of Captain Grant Harlan, and standing beside her was Governor Evelyn Lane, the highest elected official in the state. But Green wasn't intimidated. He didn't even acknowledge the governor with a nod. His eyes were locked on the past he thought he could erase. This wasn't just policy anymore. It was war. If you believe some monuments breathe and bleed beneath the weight of silence, comment, "He stood for us below." because this is the moment the mask came off and justice began to sharpen its teeth. Earlier that morning, Grant had returned quietly to the memorial. No broom. Just the photo and his satchel. He stood there alone as the sun rose over Jefferson Military Institute. The campus buzzed with murmurs. Students who once looked past him now stole glances. Phones recorded. Whispers spread. That's him. He was real. I saw the governor come for him. And then security arrived. 4 men, suits, radios, neutral expressions. They didn't push, they didn't yell, but they surrounded him. Sir, we've been instructed to escort you off the premises. You are not authorized to be here. Grant didn't flinch. He simply looked up at the flag fluttering above. I've stood here every morning for 9 years, he said softly. Didn't seem to matter until now. It's not personal. One guard replied. It never is, he murmured. Then he picked up his satchel and walked without resistance. From her office window, Emily watched it all. By the time she reached the quad, he was gone again, and that's when Green delivered his chilling decree. Governor Lane stepped forward. Chancellor, you are making a mistake. With all due respect, Governor, he said smoothly, this is a private academic institution. We have rules for a reason. Allowing an unauthorized civilian to linger sends the wrong message. What message is that Emily demanded? That sacrifice is inconvenient, that honor has a time limit. Green turned toward her. The message that history should remain in books, not bleeding out in courtyards. That line, cold and rehearsed, spread across the campus like wildfire. By lunchtime, a group of veterans from the ROTC program staged a silent walkout. One cadet removed his ribbon bar and left it on the steps of the memorial. A handwritten note read, "If he can't stand here, I won't either." Inside the administration building, Green staff grew uneasy. Phones were ringing non-stop. News outlets were asking questions. Why had a Medal of Valor recipient been denied access to a public campus? Why was the governor ignored? Green doubled down. He called an emergency board meeting and moved to issue a formal no trespassing order against Harlan. This is about protocol, he said. We can't run on emotion. But out on campus, something else was brewing. Students who had filmed the push began re-uploading the footage, but now with new captions. Veteran shoved, Chancellor silent. Real history walked away. It went viral. Local news picked it up. Then national. One broadcast played side-by-side images, Grant saluting the flag, and Grant being escorted away. No narration, just silence, and viewers filled in the rest. Inside a small diner just off campus, Grant sat at the back corner booth staring into his coffee. The waitress, a soft-spoken woman named Lorna, placed a slice of apple pie in front of him. On the house, she said. He nodded, but didn't touch it. A student entered moments later. Nervous, 18, skinny, trembling slightly. He approached the booth with a crumpled napkin in hand. On it, a single sentence. My grandfather never made it home, but today you stood for him too. Grant didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. Back on campus, Emily was approached by 2 board members, retired military officers who had seen the footage. Is it true, one asked. Was that really Captain Harlan? Yes. And Green knew yes. The men looked at each other. Then it's time we said something. They marched into the boardroom during Green's emergency session. You can revoke his access, one said, but you won't revoke our silence any longer. That night, an anonymous source leaked Green's internal email thread. It showed him referring to Harlan as a narrative liability and suggesting the governor's involvement was a publicity stunt. It exploded online. By dawn, protesters gathered at the front gates. Veterans, students, faculty. A makeshift memorial formed flags, photos, medals, even children's drawings. Grant Harlan arrived at 6 a.m. as always. But this time the gate was open. He paused, confused. Then Emily appeared holding a folded uniform, his, cleaned, pressed, ready. "Will you come back?" she asked. He looked out at the crowd gathered across the lawn. Some stood in dress blues, some in jeans, some with walkers, some with tears, and then for the first time in years he smiled. I never left. Inside his office, Chancellor Green received the call he had been dreading. Governor Lane's voice was calm but firm. Effective immediately, the state is suspending all grant funding to Jefferson until your board conducts a full ethics review. I'll be watching that review closely. Green stood alone, silent. The monument he once ignored now towered over him, not in stone but in memory and reputation. And if you believe justice should never be silenced again, subscribe now and be here for the final chapters. Because this isn't just about one man's redemption, it's about the cost of forgetting and the power of remembering. Honor without a uniform, I owe him my life, and we owe him our silence no more. Governor Evelyn Lane's voice echoed across the Jefferson courtyard, clear and unwavering. The crowd stood in stunned silence, some with hands clasped, some with tears brimming. And at the center of it all stood Captain Grant Harlan, not in uniform, not in medals, but in the same canvas jacket he wore every morning for 9 long years, staring at the flag he had saluted alone, until now. If you believe that honor is not earned by noise but by sacrifice, type. He never left his post in the comments, because this is the moment everything changed, and it didn't come with a bugle or a folded flag, it came with truth. Hours earlier, news of the protest and the governor's stand had spread like a wildfire. Networks interrupted programming, forgotten war hero expelled from campus. Photos of Grant at attention side by side with headlines calling for investigations flooded social media. Veterans from across the state arrived through the night, not to riot, not to shout, but to stand in silent formation facing the steps where Grant had been pushed just days earlier. At 6:45 a.m., the Memorial Plaza was full. At 7:00 a.m. the bells rang, and at 7:05 a.m. the ceremony began. Governor Lane took the podium, her hair pulled back, wearing a modest navy suit with a silver star pinned just above her heart. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter her brother had written shortly before his death 2 years earlier. He never knew his name, she began, but he remembered the voice that ordered him to run, the man who stayed behind. He said, "Whoever he was, he gave me my life, and I never got to say thank you." Then she stepped aside. Emily Rowan approached holding a simple wooden box. She opened it before the crowd. Inside, the frayed SRU-41 patch, the old bullet casing, and finally a folded piece of paper, Grant Harlan's original discharge letter reprinted by the Department of Defense that morning. Status active. 1980. Presumed KIA 1983. Verified identity. Reinstated with full honors. Retirement status. Retired with distinction. A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. Grant didn't step forward. He stood still, head bowed. Then someone in the front, an ROTC cadet no older than 19, raised his hand in salute. It started with one, then another, and another, until the entire square was filled with saluting hands. Students, veterans, faculty, children, even janitors in uniforms just like Grant's. But the most unexpected moment came next. From behind the governor, a figure emerged, Chancellor Green. Gone was the tailored suit. He looked tired, subdued. He stepped up slowly, turned to the crowd, and spoke into the mic. I was wrong. The air seemed to still. I judged a man not by his service, but by his silence. And in doing so, I failed this institution, this state, and this flag. He turned to Grant. And if you'll allow me, I would like to personally apologize. Gasps and murmurs spread, but Grant didn't speak. He simply nodded once. Enough, no vengeance, no speech, just dignity. The governor reached into her coat and pulled out her official state pin, an emblem worn only by serving executives. She stepped to Grant, pinned it gently to his lapel, and said softly, for only him to hear, "This is the only time I've ever saluted someone without rank on their shoulder, but you never needed one." Then she saluted, full, formal, measured. Grant blinked rapidly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the flag he folded every morning. Hand over hand, slowly he unfolded it before them all. Not for show, not for press, but for memory and for meaning. The crowd erupted in applause, not loud, not chaotic, just steady, like thunder rolling across a valley. What followed was swift. The VA issued an emergency review order. Within 24 hours, Grant's name was restored in their system. Back pay authorized, housing approved, medical care initiated, but when the team visited him the next morning, he declined most of it. "I don't need a house," he said. "I just need a place to raise the flag." Back on campus, things shifted fast. The morning after the ceremony, a new plaque appeared beneath the memorial, in honor of Captain Grant Harlan, who kept the watch when all others looked away. And by noon, Chancellor Green formally resigned, issuing a statement to the press. "Some mistakes cost reputations. Others cost us our conscience. I carry both." In a surprise decision, the Board of Trustees announced a new campus tradition. Each semester, one veteran would be selected to participate in a ceremonial morning flag raising. The first honoree, Grant Harlan, every Monday, 0600 sharp, and if you were watching, you'd see him. Same jacket, same boots. But now he never stood alone. Students gathered. Some brought children. Our OTC cadets began forming a respectful honor line. Faculty paused their walks. Silence became the custom. One day a young boy approached him, no older than 10. He held out a drawing of the American flag. "My dad says you're a real hero," the boy whispered. Grant looked at him, placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder, and said, "Heroes are the ones who don't come home. I just kept the gate open." The boy saluted. And Grant returned it. Somewhere beyond the crowds, past the reporters and microphones, Emily Rowan watched it all with quiet awe. Not because she uncovered a mystery, but because she helped restore a man to his rightful place, not just in history, but in the present. And if this story reminds you of someone who stood watch silently for years, someone who gave more than they ever asked back, share their name below. Let no one be invisible again. The Watchman of Honor. Some men never retire. They just keep standing guard even when no one else remembers. Every morning at 5:50 a.m., before the sun stretched its arms across the Virginia hills, Captain Grant Harlan walked the same worn path from his small apartment to the Jefferson Military Institute courtyard. Same jacket, same steps. A folded flag in one hand, a wooden staff in the other. And every morning the flag rose not just for the country, but for a man who refused to let it fall when no one else was watching. If this story moves you, if it reminds you of someone who stood tall when others forgot, comment, "I remember" below. Because remembrance is the only thing stronger than time. After the public ceremony, the institution changed, yes, but Grant didn't. He still swept the courtyard out of habit, still arrived before anyone else, still nodded silently at those who passed. He didn't ask for interviews or documentaries. When asked why, he simply said, "A soldier's job isn't to be seen. It's to keep things standing." But one morning something was different. He didn't arrive. At first it seemed like a fluke. The honor guard waited. Students fidgeted. Emily Rowan checked her watch again. But 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Emily made the call. There was no answer. She drove to his apartment, heart pounding. She found him in his chair, head bowed, flag still folded in his lap, hand resting gently on his walking staff. No struggle, no pain, just peace. As if the final watch had ended and it was time to rest. The flag at Jefferson was lowered to half-staff that afternoon. The Memorial Plaza overflowed within hours. Soldiers and students, nurses from the VA hospital who once quietly cared for him. A janitor from across town who said Grant once gave him a coat on a cold night. Even a bus driver who remembered Grant giving his seat to a woman with a baby. They all came. Not because he asked, but because he never did. Governor Lane ordered a full military funeral with honors, but the letter left behind in Grant's apartment said something else. I don't want a parade. I want quiet. I want the sound of boots on stone. I want one flag. One morning. One boy watching it rise. So that's what they gave him. At 6:30 a.m. on a crisp October morning, the ceremony began. No cameras, no microphones, just silence. The honor guard raised the flag in 3 precise motions. A bugler played softly, and behind them 27 children stood holding paper flags, each with a name written across the red stripes, uncles, grandfathers, brothers, men who never came home. Emily stepped forward and read aloud a letter from a cadet who had trained under Grant's quiet shadow. He taught us without words. He reminded us that service doesn't end with a discharge. It ends when we stop caring. The final note. A metal plaque unveiled beside the memorial bench. Captain Grant Harlan, the Watchman of Honor, 1983. He stood his post even when no one asked him to. But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks after the funeral, the Department of Veterans Affairs announced new reforms named the Harlan Protocol, ensuring that every presumed MIA case would undergo secondary review every 5 years. No more forgotten files, no more nameless records. Every life accounted for. And Chancellor Green, he left quietly. He never recovered his position, but worse than that, he never recovered his peace. A man once known for commanding presence was now recognized only as a cautionary tale. At a local speaking event, a reporter asked him if he had any regrets. He paused and replied, I didn't see him. And that's what haunts me. Not that I pushed him away, but that I never saw him standing there all along. The impact of Grant Harlan's life echoed louder in silence than most ever do in noise. Across the state, schools began teaching his story as part of military ethics and character education. Veterans wrote his name in letters to their grandchildren. A children's book appeared in libraries titled The Man Who Raised the Flag Alone, and every year on the anniversary of his passing, the students of Jefferson Military Institute wake early and walk the same path Grant walked. They raise the flag, they bow their heads, and they whisper, "We remember." If you've ever wondered what legacy looks like, it's not statues or speeches. It's this. It's one man walking the same path, carrying a flag no one asked him to raise, and now it's in your hands. Share his story. Pass it on, because silence only wins if we forget. And now let me ask you, who stood silently in your life, carrying more than they ever said? Tag them. Honor them. Because maybe, just maybe, the person sweeping your sidewalk is a soldier still on duty. If this story touched your heart,